You are a plumber, Julian. A brilliant plumber, but still just a plumber. Nicholas said it without even looking up from his smartwatch. He was doing some weird wrist-stretching exercise at his standing desk, wearing a $10,000 watch that probably tracked his stress levels while he crushed mine. I did not say anything. I just stared at the yellow stain on the ceiling tile above his head. It looked like someone had tried to scrub coffee out of plaster and failed. The silence stretched between us, heavy and cold, but Nicholas did not care. He just zipped up his gym bag, tapped his screen, and got ready to leave for lunch. Look, he added, we all know you keep the pipes clean, but raises? Equity? That is for big picture thinkers. Let us be realistic. You are 58, Julian. You should be thinking about a smooth runway, not rocking the boat. He gave me a pat on the shoulder that felt like he was wiping grease off his hands. He left a faint scent of expensive cologne in the air. I did not wipe my shoulder. I just sat there, listening to the hum of the server room next door. For 6 years, I had built Vortex Solutions. 43 deployed modules, 3 major pivots that saved us from bankruptcy, and countless sleepless nights. I was the one who stayed up until 3:00 a.m. eating stale granola bars and writing whiteboards full of architecture diagrams while Nicholas was presenting slides to venture capitalists. The codebase was mine. Every elegant logic loop, every fail-safe, every line of the skeleton they paraded at investor showcases was born in my basement, and now they treated me like an obsolete machine. I went back to my desk. The anger was there, but it was cold. I did not want to scream. I wanted to build a guillotine. I opened my personal laptop. I did not use the company computer because they had monitoring software installed. I logged into my personal hard drive, looking for a folder labeled Old Projects from 2019. I almost did not open it. In the tech industry, 2019 feels like a lifetime ago, but I knew what was in there. It was a PDF document. U.S. Patent No. 10,942,831. Method for dynamic predictive load distribution in a synchronous modular environment. The inventor listed was Julian Barrett. The assignee? None. It was blank. I remembered the back-end summit in 2019. The company's former CTO had passed out drunk on a beanbag chair after boasting about their seed round. When I asked him if we should file patents for the load balancer I had just designed, he laughed. He said legal was a graveyard, and patents were a waste of time for startups. He told me to focus on speed, not paperwork, so I did it myself. I spent my entire Sunday on the USPTO website, paying the $300 filing fee out of my own pocket. I did it because I was proud of my design. I did not think it would be a weapon. I just wanted my name on my creation. Over the years, Vortex Solutions grew. They built their entire platform on top of that load balancer. They called it their proprietary secret sauce. They bragged about it to investors. But they never asked me to sign an IP assignment agreement. Nicholas was too busy updating his LinkedIn bio and pitching the board to audit the legal files of the early days. Under U.S. patent law, specifically 35 U.S.C. 261, patent rights belong to the inventor unless there is a written assignment. Since I never signed one, I was the sole owner. Vortex Solutions had been running their entire enterprise on a patented system they had no legal right to use. I spent the next 4 days working from home. I told Nicholas I had a stomach bug. He did not care. He just replied with a thumbs-up emoji and told me to make sure the API latency did not spike. I spent those 4 days quietly rebuilding the core engine in a private container. I used a personal AWS account, a VPN routed through Switzerland, and changed my laptop hostname to HP DeskJet to avoid flagging their network. Every time I thought about Nicholas calling me a plumber, my fingers moved faster. By Friday morning, I had a working prototype. It was not just a copy, it was better. I had optimized the predictive routing, shaving 15% off the latency. At 10 a.m., I had a meeting scheduled. Not with Vortex Solutions. I had reached out to Audrey Pierce, the VP of Engineering at Aether Technologies. Aether was our biggest rival, a massive enterprise that had been trying to crack our latency advantage for 2 years. Audrey was a sharp woman in her 40s who did not play games. I sat across from her in a glass conference room at Aether's headquarters. I did not say a word. I just slid my laptop across the table. On the screen was the patent documentation, my commit history, and the prototype code running in real time. Audrey looked at the screen, then at the patent number, and finally at me. Is this what I think it is? She asked. It is the heart of Vortex Solutions, I said, and I own it. She leaned back in her leather chair, tapping a silver pen against her cheek. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She knew exactly what this meant. Ether had been losing ground to Vortex because of our superior load balancing. If they could license my technology, they could close the gap instantly. And if they could stop Vortex from using it, they could destroy them. Vortex built their entire cloud stack on us, Audrey said, her voice quiet. If they lose access to this architecture, their system will collapse under load. I know, I said, and they do not have a license. I never signed the assignment agreement. I checked the company records before I left. They just assumed they owned it because I wrote it while working there. But patent rights do not work that way. Audrey smiled. It was a cold, calculating smile that made me realize I had found the perfect ally. Let us talk about terms, she said. Audrey did not blink at the numbers. We spent the next 3 hours in that glass room, hammering out the details with two of Ether's corporate lawyers. They were young, sharp, and looked like they lived on espresso and billable hours. By the time the sun started setting over the valley, we had a deal. Ether would license my patent exclusively. The terms were better than anything I had hoped for during my 6 years of grinding at Vortex. I got a $450,000 upfront licensing fee, plus a 5% royalty on all cloud orchestration revenue that used my architecture. On top of that, they offered me a consulting role as chief systems architect with a $180,000 annual retainer. I only had to work 15 hours a week, mostly reviewing code and mentoring their junior devs. It was the perfect retirement package, handed to me on a silver platter by the biggest rival of the man who called me a plumber. I signed the contracts at 4:30 p.m. on Monday. The ink felt cool and heavy on the paper. For the first time in years, the knot in my stomach was gone. On Tuesday morning, I sat at my kitchen counter with a fresh cup of black coffee and drafted the email. I did not send it to Nicholas directly. I sent it to the company's general legal inbox, with Nicholas and the CEO CC'd. The subject line was simple: patent infringement and licensing violation, action required. I attached a high-resolution PDF of U.S. Patent No. 10,942,831, along with the exclusive licensing agreement I had signed with Ether Technologies. The cover letter, written by Ether's legal counsel, did not mince words. It stated that Vortex Solutions was currently deploying production software that directly infringed on federal patent rights owned by Julian Barrett and licensed to Ether Technologies. Under 35 U.S.C. 271, they were ordered to cease and desist all unauthorized use of the patented method within 48 hours. If they failed to comply, we would seek a federal injunction to halt their platform services, along with triple damages for willful infringement. I clicked send at 9:15 a.m. The reaction was almost instantaneous. By 9:45 a.m., my access to the Vortex Slack workspace was revoked. My company email was locked, and my calendar was wiped clean. They were trying to erase me, which was exactly what I expected. But what they did not realize was that I had already downloaded my entire performance review history, my Git commit chains, and every email exchange regarding the architecture 3 days prior. Then my phone started buzzing. It did not stop. The first text was from Nicholas. Julian, what is this garbage? Call me right now. 10 minutes later, another text. Julian, do not do this. We can talk about the raise. Let is be reasonable. And then, when I did not answer, the tone shifted. You vindictive old fool. You have no idea what you are doing. You are trying to ruin this company. We will sue you for everything you own. I did not reply. I just put my phone on silent, turned it face down on the counter, and took another sip of my coffee. I had spent 6 years being reasonable, and it had gotten me a pat on the shoulder and a yellow stain on the ceiling. Now it was time to let the lawyers do the talking. By Tuesday afternoon, Vortex's outside counsel sent a formal response to my personal email. The letter was filled with standard legal posturing. They claimed there was some confusion regarding the ownership of the codebase. They argued that because I was a full-time employee when I wrote the code, the company automatically owned the intellectual property under the work-for-hire doctrine. They thought they could intimidate me with big words. But work-for-hire applies to copyright, not patents. Under U.S. patent law, Ownership of a patent vests solely in the inventor unless there is a written assignment agreement. Ether's legal team was ready for this. Within an hour, they fired back a response that was the legal equivalent of a tactical strike. They attached a 14-page appendix. It contained API call logs showing my patented method running on Vortex's servers, Jenkins build pipelines with my name on the initial deployments, and a forensic timeline of the Git repository. But the real hammer was a section detailing Nicholas's public statements. They cited a LinkedIn article where Nicholas bragged about designing the company's dynamic load balancer himself, alongside a transcript of a tech podcast where he claimed authorship of the system. Our lawyers asked a very simple, very devastating question. If Vortex Solutions claims the codebase was a collective work-for-hire, kindly explain why your CTO has publicly claimed sole authorship of a patented process in multiple industry publications, and furthermore, please provide the signed assignment agreement showing that Julian Barrett transferred these patent rights to the company. We knew they did not have it, because it did not exist. The silence from Vortex was deafening. On Wednesday morning, a former junior developer I had mentored, a young guy who was still working at Vortex, sent me a message through a private encrypted email. The guy had always been quiet, but he was smart enough to know when to jump ship. Julian, he wrote, the office is in absolute chaos. Nicholas is screaming in the conference room. Legal is running around trying to purge Slack messages from 2019. He sent me a screenshot of an internal memo that had been marked confidential. The subject line was Crisis Protocol Barrett IP. The memo listed several urgent actions. Deactivate all public blog posts referencing the load balancer core, pull the presentation slides for the upcoming DevCon panel, and explore emergency countersuit options. But the last line of the memo was the one I printed out and kept. It read, Counsel advises that countersuit confidence is extremely low. Barrett has all the receipts. I stared at that screenshot for a long time. For 6 years, I had felt invisible. I had felt like a ghost in the machine I had built. Now they were scrambling in the dark because of my name on a piece of paper. And the best part was yet to come. The Q2 earnings call was scheduled for Monday morning, and Ether Technologies was about to make a move that would turn their crisis into a catastrophe. The leak was not a mistake. It was a calculated move, orchestrated by Audrey Pierce. She was the kind of executive who treated public relations like chess, and she knew exactly when to advance her pieces. On Thursday morning, 3 days after I signed the licensing deal, a prominent tech blog called Tech Shovel published a front-page article. The headline read, Tech Startup Accused of Massive IP Theft by Veteran Systems Architect. The article did not name Vortex Solutions directly in the first paragraph, but they did not have to. They included a side-by-side comparison that made it crystal clear. On the left was an old photo of me from 2019, wearing a faded gray hoodie, standing in front of a whiteboard in our old office basement. I was holding a green dry erase marker, pointing to a complex system diagram I had drawn to explain the load balancer to the initial team. On the right was a high-resolution screenshot of Nicholas Croft giving a keynote speech at a major tech conference the previous year. He was wearing a tailored blazer and standing in front of a massive digital screen, displaying the exact same diagram, claiming it as the product of his own genius. But the most damning detail, the one that the tech community seized on and turned into a meme, was a typo. When I drew the diagram on that whiteboard in 2019, I was exhausted. I had been working on 4 hours of sleep, and I misspelled the word balancer as blancer in one of the main boxes. It was a stupid, trivial mistake. But Nicholas, in his rush to copy my work and present it as his own, had copied the diagram word for word, line for line. The word blancer was clearly visible on the screen behind him during his keynote. The internet had a field day. Within hours, the hashtag Blancer was trending among developers on Twitter. Suddenly, my LinkedIn inbox, which had been a graveyard for months, was overflowing. I had recruiters from major tech firms offering me principal architect roles. I had 3 different venture capital firms reaching out, asking if I was interested in securing funding to launch a spin-out company. They did not care about my age anymore. They cared about the fact that I was the man who built the engine that was currently running one of the fastest-growing startups in the valley. Meanwhile, Vortex Solutions was trying to contain the damage. Their PR team issued a statement calling the article a collection of unsubstantiated claims from a disgruntled former contractor. But the market did not care about PR statements. They cared about risk. The real showdown was set for Monday morning. That was when Vortex was scheduled to host their Q2 earnings call. It was a public broadcast, open to analysts, investors, and journalists. I had prepared my own war room at home. I had 3 monitors glowing on my desk. On the left screen, I had the live stream of the earnings call ready to play. On the right, I had my personal AWS dashboard. And on the middle screen, I had something very interesting, a read-only view of Vortex internal system telemetry. I had not hacked anything. I did not need to. A junior engineer who had been laid off during Vortex's recent cost-cutting restructuring had reached out to me. He was angry about how he had been treated, and before he left, he realized the IT team had forgotten to deactivate a legacy guest credential for the monitoring system. He passed it to me. I did not write any code or touch their servers. I just logged in to watch. I wanted to see the telemetry in real time. At 8:55 a.m. on Monday, I poured myself a double shot of espresso. My cat sat on the desk next to me, purring softly. Completely unaware that a corporate empire was about to burn, at 9 a.m. sharp, the CEO's voice came through the speakers. He sounded confident, his voice smooth and rehearsed. Good morning, everyone. We are excited to share another quarter of exceptional growth and technological innovation. I looked at the middle screen. The system telemetry was stable. Vortex was processing about 150,000 requests per second, and their average API latency was holding at 45 milliseconds. It was a good number. My load balancer was doing its job. But at 9:05 a.m., Audrey Pierce and her team at Ether Technologies flipped the switch. Ether had quietly migrated their pilot clients to version 2.1 of My Engine over the weekend. And they had done something even bigger. They had signed Vortex's largest enterprise client, a Fortune 100 logistics company called Global Express. Global Express accounted for roughly 18% of Vortex's monthly recurring revenue, and they had been experiencing performance issues with Vortex's outdated stack for months. At 9:10 a.m., Global Express officially shifted their production traffic from Vortex to Ether. I watched the middle screen as the traffic on Vortex's servers suddenly plummeted. The request volume dropped by nearly 30,000 requests per second. In a normal system, a sudden drop in traffic is easy to handle. But because Nicholas had modified the configuration of my load balancer to make it look like he was optimizing it, the system was not prepared for a sudden, massive asymmetry. The latency graph on my middle screen started to spike. 45 milliseconds became 90, then 180, then 350. On the left screen, the CEO was still talking about their pipeline. We are confident in our market position, he was saying, when one of the analysts interrupted him. Excuse me, the analyst said, but we are receiving reports from multiple enterprise clients that their dashboards are completely unresponsive. Can you comment on the current system outage? I looked at the telemetry. The latency was now at 1200 milliseconds. The servers were buckling under the weight of their own misconfigured routing. The plumber had walked away and the pipes were bursting. The Q2 call did not recover. In fact, it spiraled into a complete disaster within minutes. The CEO tried to play down the latency issue, claiming their engineering team was already deploying a patch to handle the unexpected load. But the market moves faster than corporate lies. At 9:14 a.m., the official account of Global Express posted a tweet that went viral in the enterprise tech community. The tweet read, "Excited to be working with Ether Technologies. Lower latency, better security, smoother integration. Cheers to clean code." They even added a winking emoji. That was the final blow. The developer community on Twitter immediately started connecting the dots. Screenshots of the Tech Shovel article and benchmarks comparing Vortex failing systems with Ether's flawless performance were shared thousands of times. One prominent open-source developer posted, "Did not this code look familiar? Pretty sure Julian Barrett demoed this exact architecture at a systems engineering meetup in 2019. By 10:12 a.m., Vortex's stock price had plunged 11%. The board of directors must have panicked, because by 10:48 a.m., The Nasdaq officially halted trading of Vortex stock due to high volatility. I was sitting in a quiet cafe downtown, sipping a burnt diner coffee with Audrey Pierce. We were watching the whole thing unfold on her iPad. Audrey did not say much. She just chewed on the end of a silver pen, staring at the ticker with a look of quiet satisfaction. "You know they are going to come for you," she said, looking up at me. "They already did," I replied. "And they ran out of ammunition." The internal chaos at Vortex was laid bare later that afternoon, when another leak found its way to my personal email. It was a screenshot of a Slack thread from their executive channel, forwarded by an employee who was watching the executive suite implode. In the thread, Nicholas had typed in all capital letters, "Who the hell authorized his patent? Why was not this caught? Who filed this?" And the response from Gordon, the head of their legal team, was just one line: "You told us not to waste time on him, Nicholas." By noon, the company was trending on Twitter under the hashtag Stolen Code Startup. Vortex tried to mount a defense. On Tuesday morning, the CEO appeared on CNBC. He looked exhausted, sweating under the studio lights in a dark blue blazer that did not quite fit him. He threw out buzzwords like miscommunication, legacy contributor, and my personal favorite: "We deeply value our engineers, past and present." Meanwhile, their outside counsel sent Ether a cease and desist letter, claiming that Ether was using stolen trade secrets. Ether's legal team did not even write a long response. They simply emailed back a neatly packaged folder labeled compliance receipts. Inside was a notarized copy of my original USPTO patent registration, signed witness statements from 3 former Vortex engineers who had watched me write the code, screenshots of JIRA tickets from 2019 showing my name on every major architectural breakthrough, and a recorded Zoom call from 2 years ago. In that recorded call, Nicholas was talking to me about the deployment of the load balancer. I had asked him about getting my name on the documentation. His voice came through the recording, clear and condescending. "This is not about credit, Julian. It is about teamwork. We all share the glory here." They did not respond to that folder. Not legally, not publicly. Instead, they started quietly deleting their own history. Vortex public engineering blog was scrubbed of any mention of the dynamic load balancer. A white paper from their 2021 DevCon presentation was pulled from their site. A podcast episode where Nicholas boasted about his innovative system architecture suddenly returned a 404 error page. But the real crack in the foundation happened on Wednesday. 4 of Vortex senior engineers resigned. One of them posted his resignation letter publicly on LinkedIn, writing, "As someone who watched Julian carry this project through hell while being gaslit by management, I cannot pretend anymore. I am out." The dominoes were falling. On Thursday night, a contact inside Vortex HR department sent me a screenshot of an email thread that I had fantasized about for years. The subject line read, "Immediate termination. CTO Nicholas Croft." The reason listed was simple and brutal: gross negligence, reputational damage, and failure to disclose patent conflicts to the board. Nicholas was fired. The man who had called me a plumber, who had dismissed my 6 years of loyalty and contribution to secure his own equity, was out of the building. I read that email 5 times. And for the first time in 6 years, I took a deep breath without my hands shaking. But I wanted to see it for myself. On Friday morning, I printed out the termination email. I rolled it up, slipped it into a small gift box, and walked down to Vortex office building. I stood across the street, holding a cardboard cup of coffee. At 10:15 a.m., the glass lobby doors opened. Nicholas walked out. He was carrying a single cardboard box containing his personal belongings, a designer desk clock, some framed certificates, and a couple of books on leadership. He looked older. The confidence was gone from his posture. His shoulders slumped as he scanned the street for a cab. He saw me standing there. I did not smile. I did not wave. I just stood there, arms crossed. Nicholas stopped. He looked at me, then looked down at the street. He opened the taxi door, slid his box inside, and then turned back to look at me one last time. He mouthed something through the glass. I could not hear it over the street traffic, but I did not need to. The plumber had left, the building had flooded, and Nicholas was standing in the water. The lawsuit came 3 days after Nicholas was escorted out of the building. It was a messy, desperate, and highly performative complaint filed by Vortex new interim CTO. They claimed that I had violated my proprietary agreements, leaked trade secrets, and actively sabotaged their systems with the intent to damage their business. They even tried to paint me as a rogue developer who had coerced junior engineers into sharing confidential company data. Ether's legal team dismantled the complaint with the precision of a surgeon. Their first response was simple. Julian Barrett was never under contract for intellectual property transfer. The patent in question predated their active employment agreement clauses, and the company had failed to execute an IP assignment agreement. They advised Vortex to review their own HR files. Their second response was a warning. If Vortex wished to pursue this lawsuit, Ether would require full discovery. This included complete code audit logs, source control history, and all internal communications regarding the patent and Julian Barrett. Vortex's legal team knew exactly what discovery would reveal. It would expose every email where Nicholas had bragged about taking credit for my work, and every Slack message where management discussed burying my contributions. By Friday afternoon, the lawsuit was quietly dropped. There was no press release, no public statement. They just quietly edited the footer of their website, removing the line that read, "Powered by our proprietary load balancer technology." Now it just said built for scale. With the legal battle behind us, Ether went all in. We officially launched our new platform, powered by version 3 Mo of my load balancer. This time, my name was on the patent, on the product documentation, and on the homepage. But what surprised me most was the culture. People wanted to work with me. For years, I had been the invisible guy in the basement. Now engineers were asking for my feedback, crediting my ideas, and collaborating with me. One evening, after a long sprint, 2 young interns pulled me aside in the office break room. We read the TechShovel article and the Slack leaks. One of them said, I tensed up, expecting some awkward corporate apology. But the other one added, "You are the reason we applied to work here. You proved that they cannot just take our work and throw us away." I did not cry. Not there. But later that night, in the quiet of my home office, I looked at my old personal laptop. It was covered in coffee stains and scratches, but it was the machine that had started the fire. I felt a deep sense of peace. But the story was not entirely over. A week later, an email landed in my inbox from an unrecognized address. There was no subject line, no greeting, just one sentence. "You really think this is over?" It was Nicholas. Men like him do not simply disappear when they are defeated. They mold themselves into consultants, advisors, or strategic visionaries, finding new ways to exploit the system. It turned out he had convinced a mid-tier venture capital firm to fund a new startup. They threw together a competitor platform overnight, using a sloppy user interface and a gutted backend. But when I looked at their public API documentation, the architecture was suspiciously familiar. It was a poorly copied version of my older V1 engine. Their press release quoted Nicholas, "A product that does not rely on stolen foundations." He wanted war again. But this time, I did not need to fight alone. I had a team and a superior product. While Nicholas fumbled through public demos that crashed mid-click, Ether rolled out Edgream, our new platform powered by the V3 engine. It was a beast. It chewed through industry benchmarks and delivered performance that Nicholas's Frankenstein system could not dream of matching. We offered early migration packages to his prospective clients. By the end of the month, 8 of the 12 companies he had pitched migrated to Ether. By the end of the quarter, his venture capital backers realized they were funding a sinking ship and pulled all their capital. His startup collapsed before it even launched. A few weeks later, I ran into him at a technology gala in San Francisco. The room was bright, filled with cameras, banners, and people wearing Ether lanyards. Nicholas approached me with a drink in his hand. He had that same brittle smile he always wore, like expired cologne trying to mask his desperation. "Julian," he said, nodding as if we were old friends. "You win. I made a mistake back then. I should have taken you seriously." I tilted my head, looking at him. "You did not make a mistake, Nicholas." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "A decision," I said, "and so did I." He did not have a reply. Before he could speak, one of our junior engineers, a kid fresh out of grad school who was standing nearby, turned around. "Hey, Julian," the kid said loud enough to draw looks from the surrounding tables. "Is that the guy who laughed when you asked for a raise?" A few nearby executives turned to look. Nicholas flinched, his face turning a deep shade of red. He set his drink down on a table and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I did not watch him go. I had a keynote speech to deliver. 10 minutes later, I stood on stage in front of 2,000 people. I did not talk about revenge, and I did not talk about the stock drop. I talked about reclamation. I talked about the importance of owning your work, of standing up to the people who try to make you feel small, and of building something so undeniably good that the world has no choice but to notice. After the speech, a young woman came up to me and asked what advice I had for engineers who felt invisible. I smiled at her and said, "File the patent, then light the match."